The massive crystal dome floated in the darkness between stars like a jewel caught in black silk. Inside this structure, representatives from 1,000 different worlds gathered for what would become the most important meeting in galactic history. The air hummed with the sounds of dozens of alien languages being translated through universal communicators. Tentacles waved, crystalline beings chimed musical notes, and gaseous entities swirled in patterns that conveyed meaning to those who could read them. Ambassador Zixtela pressed her six-fingered hands against the smooth surface of her speaking podium. Her silver skin reflected the soft blue light that filled the council chamber. As the current speaker of the Galactic Council, she had called this emergency session for one simple reason that terrified every being present. The humans had stopped talking for the past 3 standard galactic cycles. Not a single transmission had come from any human diplomatic station. No trade requests, no territorial complaints, no passionate speeches about justice and freedom that the humans were famous for delivering. The silence stretched across the galaxy, like a growing shadow that made even the bravest species nervous. Captain Jake Morrison had been the last human to send any message to the Council. His final transmission had been broadcast from the diplomatic vessel Harmony just 72 hours before the silence began. The message had been short and simple, but it carried a weight that none of the alien delegates understood at the time. Jake had appeared on screen wearing his standard blue uniform with the Earth Federation symbol on his chest. His brown eyes had looked directly into the camera with an expression that seemed almost sad. "Members of the Galactic Council," Jake had said in his calm voice, "humanity thanks you for all the lessons you have taught us about civilization, cooperation, and the proper way to conduct business among the stars. We have learned much during our time as junior members of this great community. However, we have reached a decision that affects our future participation in council affairs. We are done talking. Time for action." The transmission had ended there, leaving the council chamber filled with confused murmurs and worried discussions. Many delegates had assumed this was simply another human emotional outburst. Humans were known for their passionate nature and tendency to make dramatic statements when frustrated. The Andromedan representative had even laughed, his deep voice echoing through the chamber as he made jokes about human theatrics. But 3 cycles had passed since then, and the silence continued. Every attempt to contact human diplomatic stations received the same automated response. A polite message explaining that the Terran Federation was currently reviewing its diplomatic protocols and would respond to all inquiries when appropriate. No timeline was given, no explanation offered, just the same mechanical voice repeating the same words across every communication channel. The Cathari delegate raised one of his purple tentacles to request permission to speak. His species had been trading partners with humans for over 50 years, and the sudden loss of contact was affecting their economy badly. "Speaker Zixtela," he said through his translator, "my government has sent 17 separate trade requests to human colonies in the past month. Every single request has been acknowledged but not answered. Our shipping lanes that depend on human cargo transfers are backing up. We need some kind of explanation." Similar reports came from delegates across the chamber. The Maritime Alliance had lost contact with human research teams that had been working on joint scientific projects. The Centaurian Collective found that human mining operations in their territory had simply stopped responding to regulatory communications. Even the mighty Granite Federation, whose stone-like people rarely showed emotion, rumbled with concern about human military units that had ceased all coordination activities. Zixtela listened to each report with growing unease. She had known humans longer than most delegates in the chamber. Her first assignment as a junior diplomat had been to Earth nearly a century ago, back when humans were still discovering faster-than-light travel. She remembered how eager they had been to learn everything about galactic civilization. Human delegates had attended every meeting, asked endless questions, and volunteered for every committee and working group. In those early days, humans had been almost desperate to prove themselves worthy of membership in the galactic community. They had followed every protocol, respected every tradition, and worked twice as hard as any other species to earn their place among the stars. Their enthusiasm had been both charming and exhausting for older civilizations that moved at a more measured pace, but something had changed over the decades. Human questions had become fewer but more pointed. Their suggestions had grown more confident and often more effective than traditional methods. Their technology had advanced at a rate that made older species uncomfortable. Most concerning of all, their patience with galactic bureaucracy had clearly worn thin. The ethereal representative floated forward, her translucent form shimmering with concern. The ethereals were among the oldest and wisest species in the galaxy, and their words carried weight with every other civilization. "I fear we may have misunderstood the nature of human silence," she said in her musical voice. When most species withdraw from diplomatic contact, it indicates internal problems or temporary setbacks, but humans are not like most species. When humans stop talking, it usually means they have decided to take action instead. A chill ran through the chamber at these words. Every delegate knew the human reputation for sudden, dramatic action when pushed too far. Human military history was filled with stories of seemingly impossible victories, achieved through sheer determination and creative thinking. Their exploration records showed a pattern of solving problems that other species had declared unsolvable. The Andromedan Emperor's hologram flickered to life at the center of the chamber. His massive form dominated the space, and his voice carried the authority of a civilization that had ruled star systems when most others were still trapped on their homeworlds. "Perhaps," he rumbled, "the humans simply need to be reminded of their place in the galactic order. They are a young species with much to learn. This silence is likely nothing more than a childish tantrum that will pass when they realize the consequences." But Zixthala was not convinced. She had seen the look in Jake Morrison's eyes during that final transmission. It had not been the look of anger or frustration. It had been the look of someone who had made a final decision after careful consideration. The humans had not stopped talking because they were upset. They had stopped talking because they know. Longer needed to dot as the emergency session continued, reports kept arriving from across the galaxy. Human colonies were still functioning normally. Human ships were still moving through space lanes. Human research stations were still active. But none of them were communicating with non-human entities anymore. It was as if humanity had simply decided to ignore the rest of galactic civilization. The implications of this realization sent waves of concern through every delegation present. Without human participation, dozens of ongoing projects would fail. Trade routes would collapse. Scientific collaborations would end. Military alliances would weaken. Humans had become so integrated into galactic civilization that their sudden withdrawal threatened the stability of everything. As the meeting moved toward its conclusion, one terrifying thought echoed in every mind present. If humans had stopped talking to the galaxy, what exactly were they talking about among themselves? 3 weeks passed after the emergency council session, and the reports began flowing in from every corner of the galaxy. What the delegates discovered painted a picture that none of them had expected. The humans were not hiding in their colonies, or sulking in silence. They were more active than ever before, but their activities followed patterns that made no sense according to traditional galactic law. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Rodriguez commanded the human mining operation in the Kepler 442 system, a region that had been carefully divided between 6 different species through decades of careful negotiation. For years, humans had worked within their assigned sectors, following environmental protocols and respecting the territorial boundaries that kept peace in the system. But 3 weeks ago, everything changed. Amy had simply expanded her operation to cover 3 entire asteroid belts without asking permission from anyone. Her mining ships moved through space that belonged to the Centaurian Collective and the Maritime Alliance as if those boundaries no longer existed. When local authorities tried to contact her fleet, they received polite acknowledgments but no explanations. The humans continued their work, extracting resources at a rate that far exceeded anything they had achieved before. The strangest part was that nobody tried to stop them. Every time alien patrol ships approached the human mining operation, they found themselves facing technology that seemed far more advanced than what humans had possessed just months earlier. The mining ships moved faster, their equipment worked more efficiently, and their defensive systems made it clear that any confrontation would end badly for anyone who started trouble. Commander Rick Hayes observed similar changes in the Vega sector, where human cargo vessels had operated under strict regulations for over 30 years. The shipping lanes in this region were among the busiest in the galaxy, with complex schedules that allowed hundreds of different species to move goods safely through crowded space. Humans had always been reliable partners in this system, following routes and timetables that were set by the Galactic Trade Commission, but now human ships were creating their own routes. They moved directly between human colonies without stopping at traditional waypoints or following approved corridors. Their cargo vessels traveled faster than the speed limits set by galactic law, yet they never caused accidents or disrupted other traffic. It was as if they had developed some new form of navigation that made the old safety rules unnecessary. Rick tried multiple times to contact the human ship captains directly, but their responses were always the same: polite greetings, followed by brief explanations that they were following new Terran Federation protocols. When he asked for details about these protocols, the humans simply said that all information would be shared with appropriate authorities when the time was right. The most disturbing reports came from Dr. Lisa Park, a xenobiologist who had spent her career studying the relationship between humans and alien species. Her research had always focused on how different civilizations could work together to understand the universe. She had coordinates joint expeditions, shared data freely, and published papers that helped build bridges between species that might otherwise never communicate. But Lisa had gone completely silent 3 weeks ago, and intelligence reports suggested that she was leading purely human research teams to planets that had never been explored before. These expeditions were not following the careful procedures that govern scientific research in contested space. They were not requesting permission from local governments or coordinating with existing research stations. They were simply arriving, conducting their studies, and leaving. What made this behavior even more concerning was the scope of what these human research teams were accomplishing. Reports from long-range sensors showed that they were visiting star systems that even the oldest galactic civilizations considered too dangerous or too difficult to reach. They were conducting surveys in regions of space where the physics were so strange that most species needed decades of preparation before attempting any kind of scientific mission. Council member Veltar of the Maritime Alliance brought forward the most alarming evidence during a hastily called intelligence briefing. His people specialized in monitoring deep space communications, and their sensor networks covered most of the galaxy. What they had discovered made every delegate question everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. Humans were building something massive in the empty space between galaxies. The construction project was so large that it could be detected from billions of light years away, yet no galactic civilization had any idea what it was supposed to be. The energy readings suggested industrial activity on a scale that dwarfed even the greatest engineering achievements in galactic history. The project seemed to be some kind of station or facility, but its design followed no known architectural principles. It was growing at an impossible rate, as if humans had developed construction techniques that allowed them to work faster than the laws of physics should permit. Most disturbing of all, the facility was being built entirely by human workers using exclusively human technology. General Steve Collins had once been Earth's most diplomatic military attaché, a man who spent years building relationships with alien commanders and learning their tactical methods. He had been famous for his ability to find peaceful solutions to conflicts that seemed ready to explode into galactic wars. His patient negotiation style had earned him respect from species that normally viewed humans as too aggressive and impulsive, but Steve was no longer negotiating with anyone. Intelligence reports showed that he was coordinating what appeared to be a complete reorganization of human military forces. Human colonies were rapidly becoming self-sufficient with their own defense systems, manufacturing capabilities, and resource networks. They were trading exclusively with each other and developing weapons technology at a pace that made traditional military analysts nervous. Dr. Helen Wright had spent 15 years working on joint research projects with alien scientists. Her specialty was faster-than-light communication technology, and her collaborations had led to improvements in galactic communication networks that benefited every civilization. She had been known for her patience with species that worked at different speeds and her ability to translate complex human concepts into forms that alien minds could understand, but Helen was now leading research teams composed entirely of humans, and their work was progressing faster than anything she had accomplished through galactic cooperation. Reports suggested that they had made breakthrough discoveries in both faster-than-light communication and energy generation. These advances were being shared only with other human colonies, creating a communication network that operated independently of galactic systems. As the reports continued to arrive, a terrifying pattern became clear to every intelligence analyst in the galaxy. Humans had not abandoned galactic civilization because they were angry or frustrated. They had abandoned it because they no longer needed it. Every lesson they had learned, every technique they had acquired, every relationship they had built, had served its purpose. Now they were applying all of that knowledge in ways that made traditional galactic cooperation seem slow and inefficient. The humans had graduated from galactic civilization and were building something entirely new. The emergency intelligence briefing took place in the deepest level of the Galactic Council Station, in a chamber that was shielded from every known form of surveillance. Representatives from the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy gathered around a circular table made from compressed starlight, their faces showing levels of concern that had not been seen since the last galactic war ended 3,000 years ago. General Steve Collins appeared on the main display screen, his image captured by a long-range surveillance probe that had managed to get close to a human military installation without being detected. The man who had once spent hours in careful negotiation with alien commanders was now coordinating activities that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about human capabilities. The probe footage showed Steve standing in what appeared to be a command center unlike anything in galactic military records. The technology surrounding him was clearly human in design, but it operated at levels of efficiency that seemed impossible. Holographic displays showed star maps that covered not just the local galaxy but neighboring galaxies as well. Communication systems processed data streams from thousands of sources simultaneously. Most disturbing of all, the entire facility appeared to be staffed entirely by humans. Ambassador Zixtella studied the footage with growing alarm. Her silver skin had turned a darker shade that indicated deep worry among her species. She had spent decades learning to read human expressions and body language, and what she saw in Steve's face was not the look of a military commander preparing for war. It was the look of someone organizing a massive construction project that required precise coordination across impossible distances. Dr. Helen Wright appeared in the next set of surveillance images, working in a research facility that challenged every assumption about human scientific capabilities. The probe had captured her leading a team of human scientists through experiments that involved technologies the galaxy had never seen before. Energy readings from the facility suggested that they were manipulating fundamental forces of physics in ways that most civilizations would need centuries to understand. The Andromedan Emperor's hologram flickered with static as his anger grew. His massive form dominated one end of the chamber, and his voice carried the authority of a species that had ruled star systems for millions of years. "This is impossible," he rumbled, his words causing vibrations that shook the entire room. "Humans have been members of galactic civilization for less than 2 centuries. They cannot have developed technology that surpasses our own achievements. There must be some explanation that we are missing." But the evidence continued to mount with each new report. Captain Ben Foster, who had once served as a liaison between human and alien military forces, was now commanding a fleet of ships that followed no known design principles. Long-range sensors showed that these vessels could travel faster than anything in galactic records, yet they left no energy signatures that would indicate how their propulsion systems worked. The ships themselves appeared to be built using construction techniques that violated several laws of physics. They were larger than traditional space vessels should be able to support, yet they moved with an agility that smaller craft would envy. Their hulls showed no signs of the stress fractures that should develop in any material subjected to faster-than-light travel, suggesting that humans had discovered new types of material science that the galaxy had never imagined. Commander Jack Miller had taken over as Earth's planetary defense coordinator, a position that had once been largely ceremonial since Earth was protected by galactic defense treaties. But intelligence reports showed that Jack was overseeing the construction of defensive systems that made those treaties irrelevant. Earth's orbital platforms now mounted weapons that could destroy entire fleets, powered by energy sources that produced more power than most civilizations used to run their entire governments. The most terrifying aspect of these developments was not their scale, but their speed. Human technology was advancing at a rate that seemed to accelerate with each passing day. Projects that should have taken decades were being completed in weeks. Research that should have required the combined knowledge of multiple species was being conducted by purely human teams who somehow had access to information that the galaxy had never shared with them. Dr. Paul Chun had once been a quiet researcher who specialized in comparative alien biology, spending years studying how different species had evolved to survive in various environments. His work had always been collaborative, involving scientists from dozens of different civilizations, who each contributed their unique perspectives to understanding life in the universe, but Paul was now leading expeditions to places that challenged the very definition of what life could be. Surveillance data showed that his teams were exploring parallel dimensions, alternate realities and regions of space where the laws of physics operated according to completely different rules. These expeditions were not just surviving in environments that would kill any known form of life. They were thriving and gathering information at an unprecedented rate. Captain Mary Davis commanded vessels that could traverse galactic distances in days rather than the months required by traditional faster-than-light technology. Her ships appeared to be using some form of transportation that bypassed normal space entirely, allowing them to appear at their destinations without traveling through the space in between. This technology made every existing star map obsolete and rendered traditional military strategy meaningless. Professor Kevin Lee had apparently solved energy problems that had puzzled galactic scientists for millions of years. His research stations were producing power outputs that exceeded what should be possible from any known energy source, yet they showed no signs of the environmental damage or resource depletion that usually accompanied large-scale energy production. The implications of this discovery alone would reshape galactic civilization if humans chose to share it. The ethereal representative floated forward, her translucent form shimmering with patterns that indicated deep contemplation among her species. "We have been approaching this situation incorrectly," she said in her musical voice. "We have been trying to understand human actions according to the patterns we know from other civilizations, but humans do not follow those patterns. They never have." She gestured toward the displays showing human activities across the galaxy. "When most species reach a certain level of technological development, they slow down and focus on perfecting what they have already achieved. They become cautious about change because they have much to lose. But humans do not think this way. The more they achieve, the faster they want to achieve more. They see limitations not as boundaries to respect, but as problems to solve." The chamber fell silent as the implications of these words sank in. Every delegate understood what the ethereal was suggesting. Humans had not just learned from galactic civilization and moved beyond it. They had used their time as junior members of the galactic community to identify every limitation, every inefficiency, every compromise that older civilizations had accepted. As permanent features of reality, now they were systematically solving every one of those problems, and they were doing it faster than anyone thought possible. The humans had not abandoned galactic civilization out of anger or frustration. They had outgrown it entirely, and they were building something that would make the galaxy's greatest achievements look like primitive experiments by comparison. Panic truly began when the economic reports arrived at the Galactic Council headquarters. The numbers painted a picture that terrified every civilization that had grown comfortable with the existing order of galactic trade and cooperation. Without human participation, entire sectors of the galaxy were experiencing unprecedented collapse. The Cathari Collective had built their entire trading empire around routes that depended on human cargo vessels and human coordination systems. For 50 years, their purple-tentacled merchants had relied on human efficiency to move goods between star systems that other species found too difficult or too expensive to service. But now those routes were empty, and Cathari trade ships sat idle in spaceports across their territory. Ambassador Zixtela received the first crisis reports from her own government on Centaria Prime. The manufacturing facilities that had produced components for human technology were shutting down, because their contracts had simply been allowed to expire without renewal. Centaurian workers who had spent decades learning human engineering techniques found themselves unemployed because the skills they had developed were no longer needed by anyone except the humans who were no longer buying from alien sources. The Maritime Alliance faced an even worse situation. Their entire scientific establishment had become dependent on joint research projects with human scientists. Dr. Helen Wright and her colleagues had been involved in every major breakthrough the Alliance had achieved in the past 30 years. Without human participation, research projects that had taken decades to develop were grinding to a halt because nobody else possessed the knowledge needed to continue the work. Military alliances across the galaxy discovered that they had become dangerously dependent on human tactical expertise. General Steve Collins and officers like him had been quietly integrated into the command structures of dozens of different civilizations. Their strategic thinking and innovative approaches to problem-solving had become essential components of galactic defense planning. Now that expertise was gone, leaving military commanders scrambling to fill gaps they had never realized existed. The Granite Federation rumbled with concern as their ancient leaders realized that human mining operations had been providing rare materials that were essential for their traditional stone-based technology. Without access to human-extracted resources, the Granites faced the possibility of technological regression for the first time in their million-year history. Even the mighty Andromedan Empire discovered that they had grown more dependent on human innovation than their pride would allow them to admit. Human researchers had solved engineering problems that had challenged Andromedan scientists for centuries. Human diplomats had negotiated trade agreements that kept Andromedan colonies supplied with resources from distant star systems. Human military advisors had provided tactical insights that had prevented several wars from escalating into galactic conflicts. Ambassador Zixtela called for an emergency session to address the growing crisis, but the meeting quickly devolved into desperate arguments about how to force humans back into galactic cooperation. The Andromedan Emperor demanded military action to compel human compliance with galactic law. The Ethereal suggested offering humans greater representation in galactic government. The Maritime Alliance proposed economic incentives that might convince humans to resume their previous relationships, but every suggestion ignored the fundamental reality that intelligence reports were making increasingly clear: humans no longer needed galactic civilization for anything. Their colonies had become completely self-sufficient in ways that should have been impossible for such a young species. Their technology was advancing so rapidly that they were solving problems faster than older civilizations could even identify them. Long-range surveillance showed that Earth itself was undergoing transformations that defied comprehension. The planet that had once been a crowded world struggling with resource limitations was now covered with structures that seemed to violate several laws of physics. Cities were being rebuilt using materials that were stronger than anything in galactic databases. Space elevators stretched from the surface to orbital stations that processed matter and energy on scales that exceeded the capabilities of entire galactic civilizations. The space around Earth had become filled with construction projects that followed no known engineering principles. Massive rings orbited the planet at impossible speeds, generating energy fields that could be detected from neighboring star systems. Industrial platforms the size of small moons were manufacturing products using processes that produced no waste and required no raw materials beyond what could be extracted from empty space itself. When the Council finally managed to establish communication with Commander Jack Miller, Earth's new planetary defense coordinator, his response was delivered with the polite efficiency that had once made humans such effective diplomats. But the content of his message struck every delegate like a physical blow. The Terran Federation appreciates the Galactic Council's continued interest in human affairs, Jack said, his image appearing on the main display screen with perfect clarity. Despite the vast distance between Earth and the Council station, we want to assure all galactic civilizations that humanity holds no hostile intentions toward any species or government. We have greatly valued our time as members of the galactic community and have learned much from our association with your various cultures and technologies. He paused for a moment, and his expression showed the kind of patient understanding that adults might show when explaining simple concepts to children. However, we have reached a point in our development where continued participation in traditional galactic institutions would limit our ability to explore the full potential of what intelligent life can achieve. We have discovered possibilities that exist beyond the scope of current galactic civilization, and we intend to pursue those possibilities without restriction. The implications of these words hit every delegate simultaneously. Humans were not leaving galactic civilization because they were angry or frustrated. They were leaving because they had outgrown it. They had learned everything they needed to learn, acquired every skill they needed to acquire, and developed capabilities that made traditional galactic cooperation seem primitive and inefficient. Dr. Paul Chun was leading expeditions to parallel universes where the laws of physics operated according to completely different rules. Captain Mary Davis commanded vessels that could traverse distances that would take traditional ships centuries to cross. Professor Kevin Lee had solved energy problems that had puzzled the galaxy's greatest minds for millions of years. Each human achievement represented a leap forward that older civilizations had thought impossible. The final blow came when long-range sensors detected human activities in regions of space that were supposed to be unreachable. Humans were not just exploring beyond the edges of known galaxies. They were establishing permanent settlements in dimensions that most species could not even perceive. They were building structures that existed in multiple realities simultaneously and developing technologies that could manipulate the fundamental forces that held the universe together. As the emergency session continued, one terrifying realization echoed through every mind present. The galaxy had not lost humans as participants in galactic civilization. The galaxy had lost humans as fellow inhabitants of the same level of reality. Humanity had moved beyond the limitations that defined existence for every other known species, and they were exploring possibilities that made galactic civilization look like a small and temporary experiment in organized cooperation. The Council chamber fell silent as delegates began to understand that they were witnessing the birth of something entirely new, something that would reshape the universe in ways that no existing civilization could predict or control. The final emergency session of the Galactic Council was interrupted by an unexpected transmission that came from coordinates that should not have existed. Every sensor array in the chamber registered the incoming signal, but the source appeared to be located outside the galaxy entirely, in a region of space that all civilizations had agreed was empty void. Commander Laverne Jackson appeared on the main display screen with a clarity that defied the impossible distance her signal was traveling. Behind her, the view showed stars that no galactic civilization had ever catalogued, arranged in patterns that suggested she was broadcasting from another galaxy entirely. Her blue eyes held the same patient confidence that had once made humans such effective diplomats. But now that confidence served a purpose that transcended anything the Council had imagined possible. "Greetings to the Galactic Council and all member civilizations," Lavra said, her voice carrying across the chamber with perfect clarity despite the vast distances involved. "This is Commander Lavra Jackson of the Terran Exploration Initiative, broadcasting from the Andromeda Galaxy where we have established our first extragalactic research station. We want to take this opportunity to address the concerns that we understand have been raised about human activities in recent months." The chamber fell completely silent as delegates struggled to process what they were hearing. Humans had not just moved beyond the limitations of galactic civilization, they had moved beyond the galaxy itself. The technical achievement required to establish real-time communication across intergalactic distances was beyond anything that current science considered possible. Yet Lavra was speaking to them as easily as if she were in the next room. "First, we want to express our sincere gratitude to every civilization represented in this council," Lavra continued, her tone carrying the warmth that humans were known for, but now tempered with an authority that made it clear she was speaking from a position of strength rather than need. "The lessons you taught us about cooperation, technology, and the possibilities of intelligent life have been invaluable in our development. Every species in the galaxy contributed something essential to our understanding of what civilization could become." Behind her, the view shifted to show glimpses of structures being constructed in the space between galaxies. The scale of these projects dwarfed anything that had ever been attempted by galactic civilizations. Massive installations stretched across distances that measured in light years, connected by energy conduits that seemed to be made from crystallized starlight itself. Ships moved between these structures at speeds that made faster than light. Travel looked like primitive transportation. However, we have reached a point in our development where the traditional limitations of galactic civilization no longer serve our needs, Lavra explained, her words carrying implications that sent chills through every delegate present. "The committees and bureaucracies that govern galactic affairs are designed to ensure stability and prevent conflict between species with different capabilities and goals. These systems work well for civilizations that have reached a comfortable level of achievement and wish to maintain their current status." The view behind her expanded to show human settlements on worlds that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Cities built from materials that shifted between solid matter and pure energy depending on the needs of their inhabitants. Transportation. Networks that connected not just different star systems but different versions of reality where the laws of physics followed alternate rules. Research stations where human scientists were conducting experiments that involved the creation and manipulation of entire universes. "But humans have never been comfortable with maintaining the status quo," Lavra continued, and her smile carried the same adventurous spirit that had driven human exploration throughout their history. "We see limitations not as permanent features of reality but as puzzles waiting to be solved. We view impossibility as an invitation to discover new possibilities. The restrictions that keep galactic civilization stable are obstacles that prevent us from exploring the full potential of what intelligent life can achieve." The chamber erupted in worried murmurs as delegates began to understand the true scope of what they were witnessing. Humans had not abandoned galactic civilization out of anger or frustration. They had evolved beyond the need for civilization itself as the galaxy understood it. They were exploring possibilities that transcended the physical laws that governed the existence of every other known species. Dr. Paul Chun appeared briefly in the transmission, working in a laboratory that existed in 7 different dimensions simultaneously. His research team was conducting experiments that involved the creation of new forms of matter that could exist in multiple realities at once. The implications of their work suggested that humans were not just exploring alternate universes but were actively creating new versions of reality that better suited their expanding capabilities. Captain Mary Davis commanded fleets of vessels that moved through spacetime in ways that made traditional concepts of distance and travel time completely irrelevant. Her ships could appear anywhere in the universe instantly, and they seemed to be exploring regions of existence that had no connection to normal space. The transportation network they were building would allow humans to spread across not just multiple galaxies, but multiple versions of the universe itself. Professor Kevin Lee had apparently solved the fundamental energy equation that governed the existence of matter and energy throughout the cosmos. His research stations were producing power by tapping directly into the forces that held reality together, giving humans access to essentially unlimited energy for any project they chose to undertake. This discovery alone made every other civilization's technology look like primitive tools by comparison. We want to emphasize that we hold no grudges against any galactic civilization and harbor no hostile intentions toward any species, Lavra said, her voice carrying the sincerity that had always characterized human diplomacy. Our withdrawal from traditional galactic institutions is not a rejection of the values that bind civilized species together. It is simply a recognition that we have outgrown the limitations that those institutions require. The transmission showed glimpses of the massive construction project that humans had been building in intergalactic space. The structure was revealed to be a gateway of some kind, a transportation hub that could connect different galaxies, different dimensions, and different versions of reality. Through this gateway, humans were spreading across possibilities that other civilizations had never imagined existed. We extend an invitation to any civilization that wishes to join us in unrestricted exploration and development, Lavra concluded, her words offering a choice that every delegate knew would reshape the future of the galaxy. For those species that are ready to move beyond the comfortable limitations of traditional civilization, we welcome you to contact us directly. Our communication networks operate independently of galactic systems, and we can provide the technology needed for real-time contact across any distance. For those civilizations that prefer to maintain the stability and security of the current galactic order, we wish you well and hope that you will remember us fondly. We will not interfere with galactic affairs, and we ask only that you not attempt to interfere with ours. The universe is vast enough for both approaches to coexist peacefully. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in complete silence. As delegates slowly began to file out, each returning to civilizations that suddenly seemed small and limited by comparison, they carried with them the knowledge that the galaxy would never be the same. Somewhere beyond the edge of known space, humanity was exploring possibilities that redefined what it meant to be alive and intelligent in an infinite universe.